Joining us now, Brad Blakeman. He was a member of President George W. Bush's senior staff. He served from 2001 to 2004 as a deputy assistant to the president for appointments and scheduling, vetting, and research correspondence and surrogate scheduling. Brad Blakeman, how big was your business card to fit all that?
It was pretty long. I think it went on both sides.
Well, I thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we're recognizing the fact that President Bush's library is now opening. And I want to ask you, you were part of the campaign in 2000, and so much has been said about President Bush's legacy and about his presidency. Do you think because of the difficulties of the recount and how contentious it was that the deck was sort of stacked against President Bush just going in?
I think certainly we had challenges going in because of the 37 days. We were kind of cheated out of the ability to have a full transition. But having said that, we hit the ground running. I think because we were tested during the recount, we all stayed together as a cohesive team and just hit the ground running January 20th and really never stopped. And, of course, we were tested very early in the Bush presidency by the passing of No Child Left Behind, tax cuts, and then, of course, the unforeseen 9/11/01, which really not only rocked the domestic agenda but made the president focus on keeping America safe and reorganizing government, which was a huge unforeseen test, which was, I think, history will look back and say we had the right guy at the right time because but for 9/11, we probably couldn't have done the things to protect America.
Brad Blakeman, there's no doubt that 9/11 and the war on terror as executed by President Bush and his team is going to be the defining moment of his presidency. My question is, we're 10 days after the latest terrorist attack domestically here in the United States in Boston. I wonder if you can reflect on how the Obama administration deals with this issue differently than President Bush did.
Well, we know that President Obama thinks differently about terrorism because he said so. Shortly after becoming president, he pretty much put the word out in his government that we no longer use the word war on terror. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. The president has kind of had a schizophrenic view on terrorism. In one instance, he's very tough in drone attacks, getting Osama bin Laden, and in others, he's very weak and hesitant to call attacks what they are, whether it be in Benghazi or in Boston initially. So the president publicly is very timid about the war on terror, but privately, at least in working with the Pentagon and the intelligence services and targeting people, he's been very tough.
We're looking at these new surveys that are out from ABC, Washington Post polls, suggesting that the opinion about George W. Bush, well, people are getting a warmer feeling about the president as time goes on. When he departed the White House, his approval rating at 33%. That's historically low for a second-term president. It's now at about 50%. Why do you think it is that people, as time passes, are having a warmer feeling about former President Bush?
Well, it's been said that absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think there's some truth to that. But also the fact that leadership is never appreciated in its time. It's only after time that people can look back and give a fair and full assessment of what was done. President Bush was able to do things that he planned to do, but more importantly, he rose to the occasion as president for things that were totally unplanned, unforeseen, but he was able to grasp the situation, lead America through tough times, and get a pretty good result. So I think people looking back on his presidency said, we had the largest attack to the American homeland. We reorganized government, Patriot Act, FISA Act, keeping us safe, no child left behind in education, reducing taxes. The president had a very, very good record, even on the environmental issues that President Bush went after, was very favorable to Republican presidents. So overall, I think now the American people appreciate the leadership that maybe they didn't so appreciate when it was happening.
He has said that he is comfortable with whom he is. He also says that when he was president, I remember this because I covered him some over there at the White House, he always used to say, I don't really pay much attention to what the news media say about me. In your experience, was that really true, or did it occasionally just get under his skin?
I think occasionally it did, but in governance, and I was around pretty much 24/7 when I was serving at the White House, the president did not put his finger up in the air on the South Lawn to determine which way the political winds were blowing. I can tell you that as a fact. He didn't pretty much care what the press said about him. He knew that if he did the right thing for the right reasons, good governance is good politics, and history will be the judge, and history will be the judge. And and he's pretty comfortable in what history's final determination will be.
Brad Blakeman's our guest. He was a senior advisor to the President George W. Bush presidency in the first term. And I wonder, you saw how Michael Moore treated the president in that film Fahrenheit 9/11, and he was criticized often, the president was, for golfing and for fundraisers sometimes. But boy, you look at what President Obama's doing, it's almost on steroids. Not just the frequency of golfing, but things like, the night after the Benghazi attacks, President Obama went to a fundraiser in Las Vegas. I wonder, when you were around, would you have advised President Bush to do something like that?
I certainly would not. It's kind of shocking to me that President Obama has been so callous and so unfeeling at times in the things that he's done at times of crisis or just after crisis. It's kind of an aloofness or a condescension to America. The fact that we're $16 trillion in debt, we have a $3.6 trillion annual budget, and the president can't even figure out a way to keep White House tours open.
Yeah, but you mentioned the debt, you mentioned the spending, and the amazing thing is President Obama likes to blame President Bush about that, about the economy, about the deficits, about the spending. I mean, at what point does President Bush want to push back on that and say, hey, none of this stuff is my fault?
Why has he remained so quiet all these years?
Well, I think, he's had a good teacher. His father is a member, as he is now, of a very exclusive club of presidents. And President Bush knows, both of them do, that we only have one president at a time, and that his time has come and gone, and it's time for this president, good, bad, or indifferent, to lead our country.
I get that, but, he actually, though, he gets blamed a lot. It was one thing when he was president. He didn't blame his predecessor, as President Bush has been blamed by the Obama administration.
This is true, but as we're seeing as time goes by, the American people can figure it out. And I think they have. So it's not the president going out and defending himself. It's the American people using their own judgment and good common sense to figure out what went on, why it went on, and how it affected their lives. And I think we're seeing now, as time goes by, that people are appreciating the leadership. So he really doesn't have to do much of anything. His record's out there, and people can judge it for themselves, aided by good, thoughtful, historic pieces by competent people.
All right, Brad Blakeman, just to finish it up, just to bring it back to the 2000 election, which really was so historic. We're looking at the library, and I know that the recount is going to be a big part of the Bush library. Looking back, do you think that America has addressed the irregularities and issues with our election system right now in light of what happened in 2000, and what can we do better?
Well, I think we need a national voting standard for national elections, because if we were able to do that, then states would follow, without being dictated to, a national standard. But the fact that states are so diverse in a bad way, in voting hours, in accessibility, in voting machines, in counting and recounting, is really detrimental to a fair national election when so many different rules apply. So I think a federal standard should be had for national elections, which is full and fair for every jurisdiction in every state. And we haven't reached that point yet. And I think that we need it in order to ensure that the voting system is fair for everyone.
Brad Blakeman, thanks so much for joining us this morning as we reflect on the presidency of George W. Bush on today, the opening of his presidential library.